Hello, welcome to another episode of Namtaro Talks. Today's topic, it's a bit more, let's say a bit more personal, and I will disclose something pretty, let's just say it's pretty big in my current life at the moment. Let me just preface this episode by saying that though I'll be honest, I have many topics down the pipeline. I have many episodes down the pipeline, and not to mention all these topics, they have many outlines and ideas laid out. And this current episode, I wasn't sure when to make an episode about it, but I figured that since it's pretty fresh in my mind, I might as well do it sooner than later, because sometimes you need a motivation to talk about a certain topic. Well, anyways, as you can tell by the title, the topic of today's episode is about my upcoming parenthood. Yes, my wife and I, we are going to be parents very soon. I'll be a dad and she'll be a mom, obviously. Well, the reason I wanted to make an episode about this, I mean, it's not necessarily, oh, I'm so nervous, oh, what's going to happen, what's going to be like. It's more about, I guess, more introspective about it, based on the main question being, why? Yeah, because we see the dynamic everywhere. We're like the child of someone, and many of our peers, a fair amount, are going to be parents soon. And we can look at our parents, we can look at our friends' parents, we can look at our cousins' parents, which would be our aunts and uncles, and of course our grandparents were at one point parents. So, and we just took it for granted, like, okay, this is a mother, this is a father, or in certain other couples, these are the two parental figures. But I don't know how often people really took the time to sit down and think why we did it. There could be a plethora of reasons, because you're in a good position in life, or you feel like it's your duty to do so, or maybe societal pressure, or you just want to embrace a challenge, or you think it's the next step. It could be any of those reasons, really. I mean, I don't know the full reason for us. I mean, it's a combination of all those reasons, and I don't know. We're just doing it. It's happening. We're going with it. And there's also many different dynamics behind it. Sometimes it's planned. Sometimes it's out of nowhere. Sometimes it happens like later in life. Sometimes it happens early in life. Yeah. So it depends on the parents' position in life, or the timeline or snapshot of their life also, that would prepare and welcome a new life into the world. Or in the case of adoption, which we're not, of course, in the case of adoption, we'll be preparing a home for an upcoming child, like a nurturing environment to, I don't know, prepare a child for the world and cultivate their knowledge and emotional well-being and intelligence and physical health and whatnot. And I can honestly only really base it on my observations in my immediate circle, and pretty much just friends, families, cousins. Makes me wonder, why did my parents have me? Why did my friends and cousins and peers decide it was their time to become parents? What factors come to making that decision? Because to be honest, everyone, the common consensus I hear about it is that it's not easy. And of course, I don't expect it to be easy. If it was easy, everyone would do it. And because it's such a low risk, high reward, and there will be a huge return on investment, right? But it takes work, it takes effort, it's also luck too, And it's not just a parental effort, it's also a community effort, familial effort, ideally anyways. Yeah. And I'll be honest, I see a lot of my peers, well, just based on their testimony, they struggle, they suffer. Some might say that they're miserable at times, but they wouldn't openly admit it. And they sacrifice a lot. They sacrifice their well-being, their physical health, their mental health, of course, financially, their time and effort. But to them, it's the decision they make, and in their eyes, it's worth it. So I guess my question is, I have an idea that it's worth it, and you wouldn't go into doing something like this, committing yourself to it, if you didn't think it was worth it. But the question is, why? I mean, you're not going to get the answer from this podcast. You just get a couple speculations, that is. However, I guess that's the perk about this episode, because it can relate or talk to people who are already parents, people who are similar position as me, or upcoming parents, or people who see parenthood sometime in their future. Some reasons that I've heard is that, oh, it's because they're so cute, like you just look how cute that kid is, or according to my parents, that there was an unspeakable or undescribable feeling that they had whenever I came home. I greeted them when they came home from work, and I just ran out to the door and greet them. Or when my mom was out of town, when she came home, my babysitter said I was waiting at the window for my mom to come home, and I guess that gave my mom like the warm fuzzies. I don't know how to best describe it, and it's not something that I cannot articulate upon until I experience it myself, But that's just based on what other people had told me. But you don't do it for just a feeling or a couple moments like that, and it's fleeting, But then everyone says, "Oh Lord, these are precious moments, and they grow up so fast." So you gotta appreciate and capture it, and appreciate those memories as best as you can. But I don't think that's the only reason or the main reason. So I kind of like postulated possible two reasons. Well, it's not everyone's reasons, but they make sense to me somewhat. And honestly, these reasons may change or be elaborated on, or might be thrown out the window sometime in the future. Maybe as I get closer to like the moment of truth, or even afterwards, At least two reasons that come off the top of my head are that being a parent, it's a return on investment, and it's also in the challenge in itself. And when I say return on investment, I don't mean like a selfish, like individual return, like you're not raising a kid so they make you look good, or they'll take care of you in the future. Though some people, they do it for different reasons, and that could be a reason, but that shouldn't be the only reason or the main reason. When I say return on investment, is because a child, it's like a relative blank slate, It's full of potential and possibilities, because and it's growth, and it's a bunch of like growth and development, and also specific phases and time windows that you want to capitalize on and make the most of, whether it's learning certain skills, or cultivating certain interests, or developing certain personality types and emotional health and well-being. And in order to cultivate all that, it takes an investment, not just time, effort, blood, sweat, tears, money, and according to this one book I read, well, not the whole concept of the book, but one idea they mentioned was that you got to approach it more like a gardener, not really a carpenter, because there's no step-by-step cookie-cutter process to raise a kid. Like, you do this at this step and this at this next step, or point A to point B. Like the gardener metaphor, it's more to cultivate an environment of, I guess, love and nurturing and learning and finding yourself and developing your own identity and growth. But such an environment, it's easier said than done. And it's not just money, it's also people and community and opportunities, even immediate surroundings and neighborhoods and experiences. So to cultivate such an environment, it takes resources, of course, but then not only do you want to be in a position to provide those resources, but you would also want the best knowledge base and judgment on how to provide those resources, like how much and in what way that is most relatable and digestible, and the best time to provide those resources. And I'll be honest, perhaps it's likely a sense of pride that, oh, my partner and I, we made that, we helped build that, we helped create that. Like, that is the byproduct, that the end product, the result of our final project, of what you see. But it's not that simple, and it shouldn't be that case. It's not some kind of something to show off. I mean, it's like I say, there's something to be proud of, something to be shared, but it's something that's brought onto the world, because that is a living, growing individual with like a developing knowledge base, a developing sense of identity, and developing emotional state and interests, who are growing, changing, adapting, and a giant combination of nature versus nurture. You can impart your wisdom, experiences, resources, But at the end of the day, I mean, you're not your child. You can't live your child's life. They are an entirely separate entity that's representative of you, that you were responsible for. And of course, they are a reflection of you, but that shouldn't be the only reason, because we live in a world with other people, and a bunch of other people. We get together, we form communities and larger entities like neighborhoods, cities, towns, countries, and we want a child or an individual to be part of that world, part of that society, part of that community that imparts their traits, their individuality, their unique features upon that community. I'm not saying to necessarily conform, but that has to be something that make that child, that specific individual, who they are and why they are that way. And you can't just exist, You can't just be hedonistic and be selfish and just ask for the society and the community to give you your resources and give you whatever you want and consume. The individual we raise gotta be a contributing member of society. I mean, it's not always necessarily have to go to school or get a job and make money and whatever, but be good, be moral and ethical and respectful and cultivate a safe environment. But be smart, be inquisitive, be open-minded, be willing to learn, be willing to listen, be willing to explore. You don't want someone to turn out super selfish or self-centered, but you don't want them to be stuck in their own bubble too. Like, this is the only way life is. No. That's not the case. Like, the world's becoming globalized. There's many other countries and cultures and places to explore out there. Why should whoever we bring into our life restrict themselves to our immediate circle or our immediate experiences and circumstances? I'm not saying that you have to go out there and do everything and see everything and go everywhere, but at least give them a sense that they are part of something bigger, that there's a whole world out there, that there's a whole bunch of opportunities out there also. And you gotta help them distinguish between what's good and bad, what's right and wrong, what's justice. And I know everyone's sense or every community, it might have a slightly different sense of that, but I'm talking more common stuff, okay, the pretty much fundamentals are you shouldn't lie, you shouldn't cheat, you shouldn't steal, because those three things, you're pretty much infringing upon the rights and safety and well-being of the other people around you, other people in your community, and it's not fair, and you wouldn't want that to be done onto you. So it's like the kindergarten mantra, like treat others how you want to be treated. There's a reason behind it too. With your child, you could determine which values take priority, what you want to impart upon them, whether it's a certain culture, whether it's a certain religion, whether it's money, whether it's family, whether it's community, whether it's academics, whether it's business. It could be anything. But of course, though you impart the values, you help them determine the priority of the values, but regardless, it still has to be balanced. Yeah, at the end of the day, it all ties back to this. You want the person you're raising to be balanced and well-adjusted. In the ideal world, everyone would end up like that. Not to mention having emotional toughness and a growth mindset, a little bit of spirituality, a little bit of philosophy, emotional intelligence, and being able to grit. Yeah, definitely grit. Being able to cope with hardship and failures. Being willing to learn. Ideally, also develop logic, reasoning, critical thinking. I mean, it's pretty much the scientific process in a way. I mean, I'm not the most scientific person out there, but you gotta maybe have a hypothesis, and what's the experiment, what research has been done, what evidence is there, how can it be disproved? Maybe this takes a place of the sake of a debate. It also comes into mind, or a persuasive essay, why is this point the way it is? And you gotta teach them how to discuss, how to rationalize, how to defend themselves, of course, physically and verbally, and not to mention physical health, which I did another episode about. Yeah, I mean, you want them happy, healthy, like enough exercise and the right diet. Of course, extracurricular activity with sports or understand like cardiovascular endurance, all these understand like coordination and building strength, not necessarily muscles, but balance. It's like pretty much physical body aspects that a lot of us take for granted, and some of it comes secondhand during human development at certain stages of your life, but to cultivate it and maintain it throughout your adulthood. Well, not just adulthood, but the rest of your life, really. And I know I'm rambling. Yes, I'm Namtaro the Rambler sometimes. But in a way, these are, I guess, many factors to determine if having a child, like, it pays off and it's worthwhile. Not necessarily for you, not necessarily only for society, but not necessarily only for the child themselves, but all of that, like a little bit of individualism and collectivism. Yeah, those themes they come into play pretty often. Yeah, another thing I'll disclose about myself is that I used to be in Scouts, and in Scout they had, I think it was the Scout Oath, and there were 3 factors that they want Scouts to be, which is physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. And I believe I covered a little bit of all those in the previous minutes. Because with this day and age, it is very easy to do the opposite. Like physically strong, it's very easy to, I don't know, be physically lazy and not move so much and neglect exercise and neglect your physical health and eat junk food and processed food with high fructose corn syrup. And before you know it, like, your bones are less dense and your muscles atrophy. And mentally awake, it's like you gotta have a clear state of mind. You don't want to be clouded with too much emotions. You don't want other substances to cloud your judgment. You don't want to be in groupthink. You want to surround yourself with the right friend circle, and morally straight. Like I briefly talked about right and wrong. So it makes you kind of prioritize the values, like it's not about attention. It's not about what's being popular. It's not about putting money on a pedestal. It's not being like the alpha or your social circle. Maybe a little bit of all that, but it's also about knowing what's right and wrong and having the courage, assertiveness, and moral conviction to stand behind it and call it out as appropriate. And I know life isn't perfect. Sometimes you are dealt a certain hand, or sometimes factors out of your control just happen to strike you and you have a setback. However, you don't want you want the individual to have their common core values and their belief in themselves, to like build themselves back and know their core identity, know what's right and wrong. You don't want them to, okay, long story short, be a criminal, like jeopardize the safety and well-being of themselves or their family and peers or others in the community. You don't want them to be a burden, and I know no one wants to be a burden. No one wants to be seen as a burden. But you want them to build the resilience and self-sufficiency that, I can handle my own. I know this. I can do this. I've learned about this in the past. I've had this or that experience. And that I will apply all that to any new situations and hardships that might occur. I'm not going to go around and cause like mischief and havoc and chaos and waste the efforts of my parents and my community, waste the gift of life that I was given. That it took my mom like typically 9 months to like build, and my parents like pretty much everything after that. You don't want them to waste it, because anyone who's like falls down that path, it's a huge waste. I'm not calling you a waste of life. I'm just saying it's missed potential, or it could have gone a different way. And they say that it's easier to raise a strong person than to fix a broken person. And there'll be things in life that may bend you a lot, that may break you even. I mean, I've been broken before, but you want to know that you have the means to fix it and you want to fix it. We want someone who is strong enough, smart enough, and insightful enough to realize all that. And I'm sure a lot of parents out there, whether in general or in my immediate circle, they didn't think about all this stuff. They were like day to day, or the days blend together so much. You want the one that you raise to know who you are, who they are themselves. That they are free in their mind, that they are in control. They are not subject to the whims of the government or a certain religion or a certain code or consumerism or hedonism or an addiction. You want them to, at the very end of the day, be themselves, know themselves, and that is based on the foundation that you laid down. And sometimes that individual, they will be lost. Like, I've been lost sometimes. But then if you have a foundation of, where you came from, how you were raised, what you grew up with, what experiences you had. Sometimes it was pleasant, sometimes it's not. If it's not pleasant, then it was a learning experience. And you got to give them the means and the opportunities to figure it out, to learn from that, So they're not anxious, so they're not a deer in the headlights. You don't want them to be needlessly taking risks, but you also don't want them to be scared of the world either. Of course, you want them to learn from your mistakes and others' mistakes, but also have the room to make their own mistakes, but without too much judgment and criticism. But I guess mistakes in as controlled an environment as possible. That is not too drastic or too big or impossible to recover from. But ideally, you try to, I guess at the end of the day, go back to an environment of love and acceptance, because like the family being the foundational unit. Because my parents made mistakes, I made mistakes, and I'm very sure my kid will make mistakes. But there's nothing that, if it starts with the family or the parents, then it starts there, That's where you begin to realize and figure out how can it be overcome. Because you bring an individual into the world, but is not 100% individual in that sense, that they're completely on their own and by themselves. They're thrown to the wolves. There's a foundation, there's a background that's been laid for them to help to figure it out, to learn and come out of certain situations better. And it's not all academics, it's not all getting ahead in society, it is not all face and honor and culture, It's a factor of all of that. Because if you put too much weight against something that goes against the individual themselves, they will either lose themselves to it, or they will either check out or give up, And the consequences of that, they're not good, to say the least. And I mentioned resources, and there is the mindset that, I want to give my children what I didn't have growing up. But there's another balance in that too, because sometimes you're strapped for resources, and not everyone gets the ideal opportunities, but you make the most of what you have, and you stretch it, You use every single resource to the maximum potential to its ability. But you don't want anything like excessive and wasteful or too much of a consumer mindset either. And it's like a balance between conforming enough, but knowing that there is an individual in there. Like, not everything has to be prim and proper, but not everything is chaotic and anarchy, There has to be some structure, some discipline. But it's also at different stages in your life, Because you're not going to just let a 5-year-old do whatever they want, but you can't constrain like a 17-year-old either. You got to slowly know when to release like the freedom, You got to slowly introduce it. Okay, I gave you some agency to do this and go here and think that and express yourself and conduct yourself this or that. It's like a right place and the right time at the right phase for everything. Without parenthood, there would be no life, no history, no developments in over time. So that's why sometimes it made me kind of wonder what happens about how do people in places with societal conflicts and like very poor infrastructure, how are they parents, Because the prospects and opportunities are limited, and the immediate environment for the parents and the next generation, is misery, like being uneducated, destitution, poverty. I mean, I can talk down about that, but they made it work, They're making it work right now in some parts of the world that have it much worse than I do, but they're making it work somehow. And they made it work in the past too. And I understand that it is not a linear path. There'll be roadblocks, hiccups, detours, pauses, many things that will test my, I guess, emotional intelligence and sanity at times, probably physical health for sure. Nothing that will compromise it, but you gotta make it work. You gotta figure out a way. You gotta learn how to resolve conflict. I'm not saying that the kids are the conflict, but the responsibility at the end, it falls onto the parent, because they are the example. They're the initial source. And from what I heard, and even from my own experience, the kids are impressionable, They are sponges. They hold on to anything. Like whether it's like a piece of knowledge or a certain experience that happened or something they've seen once or heard once, they can hold on to it for years, decades, or even the rest of their lives. It shapes their perspective and mentality until something better or more meaningful or persuasive changes it or turns it into something ideally more positive and clearer. That's why conduct, it plays a huge factor. I know I'm not perfect with the way I conduct myself, but I make an honest effort. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I only have a few months to fix this before the moment of truth, I'm just kidding about that. But I guess the first step is to be aware of it. And, it would not fly because maybe you saw it in the past, maybe it quote unquote worked, but that shouldn't be the norm, You got to break the cycle of not necessarily trauma, but I guess habits that were unsavory. I don't know how to best say it. Not necessarily compromise your identity, but just know that there are alternatives, There's better things out there. It's like the path towards a better direction, so you want the kid to at least start facing that path. And sometimes there will be misses, and that's okay. Because it's better to at least know what's out there, what opportunities, what concepts, what ideas are out there, rather than be completely blind to it or shut it out and then be super closed-minded in your own insular bubble, Like, my parents, they drove me to my share of the most random extracurricular activities out there. Like, I don't jump rope or tap dance or do debate club or do like the business club, or it doesn't really apply to me as much anymore. But some they kind of impose upon me. Some I figured out on my own. I don't play the violin anymore, but at least I had the opportunity to see, oh, okay, that's what it's like. That's how you take care of the bow with the resin. That's the 4 strings. That's where you put your fingers and whatnot. This is how I could contrast it to a piano, and this is where the violins and all the other different string instruments fit in the orchestra. So at least it introduced me to that experience, that concept, And it's not always about random extracurricular fields out there, but enough meaningful, applicable exposure in the formative years, like when they can have a better concept of self and develop feelings and memories, or in my case, learn how to be better with recollection, whether it be taking pictures or journaling, to chronicle certain parts of one's life and be reflective as appropriate. I will personally and even probably selfishly add that I'm at a decent point in my life that I've done and went and saw a fair amount of places and done a lot of things and experiences and hobbies. I mean, it's not like I gotta cram everything else that I ever want to do in the next few months and learn whatever I want in the next few months before like the moment of truth, before I have new responsibilities. But I'm in the position and had the time and capacity to do, I would say, enough. I mean, I'm not saying that once the kid comes, I can't do any of those things or I'm 100% stuck on the kid, But it's like, okay, I've done that, I've seen that, that's cool, that's a part of me, and perhaps I can impart it upon the kid somehow. There's only so much I can impart. Like, the kid will have his own skills and experiences and knowledge, and a lot of it will be out of my control. Of course, my parents, they impose like their values, ethics, cultural heritage and language upon me, I mean, among other things. But there were many other factors that I figured out on my own, like video games or TV shows or other pop culture stuff or music tastes. And that would likely be the case with the kid. He would do and see and know stuff that I have absolutely no idea about. But there's like a appreciation and respect that comes with it, you know? It's like, okay, they figured that out on their own. They're learning that on their own. They discovered that. And it's not something that's isolated to yourself. Maybe you could share it or impart it upon not necessarily your parents, but like other peers and an audience out there, you know? Because before, as a parent, your kid was your audience, and now your kid, when he has a kid, like that's their audience, but they have their own audience too. Like a certain parent's audience is not just the kid themselves, but also their peer circle, their friends, families, coworkers, whatnot. So, in a parent to child relationship, it's a different kind of dynamic. It's a different kind of audience. Anyways, I am approaching what I call the magical target mark. Yeah, I will not have like a 16-minute episode again. Honestly, I'm shooting for between 20 and 30, and maybe slightly over 30 is fine based on a certain person's attention span. But I believe I said as much as I can about this topic. So, long story short, as a parent and for the child, and even as a child looking back towards me, there's a lot to learn, a lot to teach, a lot of other factors going on, but you take the individual into account, you take the surrounding environment into account, the society into account, of course, nature versus nurture, and I want to cultivate the ideal environment. When I say ideal, I mean, you would want it to be ideal. It's not going to be perfect, but as best as possible with what you have, what you've known, what you've learned, and what you're given, and what you want to get. This episode wasn't really meant to, quote unquote, teach anyone, but it's pretty much just my take, my current stance, my current opinion at this snapshot, you know? Yeah, like I say, hopefully there's something in here for current parents, soon-to-be parents, or future parents. Maybe one day the kid will find this and he'll be like, Dad, what the heck were you saying and what the heck were you thinking? I don't even know when or if he'll find this or around what age would he be able to understand and appreciate it. I'm just guessing preteens or teens. But I guess my best message for you right now is I'll help you grow. I look forward to seeing you grow, and I'll try my best, and so will your mom. Well, anyways, today's talk was a bit unconventional. But then again, like I said before, I have no idea how these things turn out or how this whole series will turn out. But regardless, if you've listened to this point, I just do appreciate it, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Thank you.